Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome back to the last video of our regularly scheduled October content. Aside from the, of course, long-awaited intro to Nothing But Black Metal November. And I'm decked out in my Primitive Man shirt, not black metal, but it looks pretty blackened. And I'm wearing it because I'm having a little performance tonight with my band Fallacy. This video won't be up by the time the performance happens, but I just want to shout us out because I just posted about us on Instagram, or I put us on my story, and we're doing a lot of cool stuff, and I just shameless plug because we're freaking awesome. Now today we're talking about Japanese black metal. Now in Nothing But Black Metal November, if I continue this channel through 2023 into that November, I'm gonna start kind of covering regional scenes in my Nothing But Black Metal November content next year. I'm thinking gonna do like Greece or something. I'm kind of dipping into that sound a little bit this year with some Rotting Christ. There's a little teaser if you're looking forward to the list, but I'm thinking I'm gonna keep that going next year. And instead of doing a regional scene this year during the content, I'm covering this Japanese black metal chart, and this is gonna be a little bit of a shorter chart discussion than I would normally do. This is 15 albums long, so it's a little longer, but I'm going to try and bust it out kind of quick because I honestly didn't even want to do this one because a lot of it felt pretty disappointing to me. Because Japan, their black metal scene, at least you look at these heavy hitters here, heavy hitters, they really don't hit that hard. Even though a little over half of these I rated as great, it just felt like a very disappointing chart to me. A few of these albums were just really disappointing, and I feel like I may have given a little bit too good of a score to a good chunk of these just because the bad ones really were bad. And I mean, I'm kind of forgiving to cheesiness in black metal for some reason, but take a lot of this good stuff with a grain of salt because a lot of it was not as good as I wanted it to be. And a lot of this kind of really connects to this avant-garde style of Japanese black metal, and by avant-garde, I really mean they use a lot of traditional Japanese instruments. And I respect using your culture's instruments to make music. I've heard traditional instruments used on top of the distorted guitar that actually sounds pretty cool. Tra's been doing that all year with like oboe or something. It tends to work sometimes, but it does not work all the time. And there are some serious cases of it here. And whenever an album is something I don't love, I'm going to gloss over it pretty quick and probably recommend you something else if I can. But other than that style, you also get a healthy dosage of DSBM, which, I mean, feels, I don't know why, but I feel like Japan does have a lot of good quality DSBM, because I know Korea's got some DSBM too, China's got some DSBM. For some reason, East Asia just happens to have a good chunk of DSBM, and it's never really all that cheesy, like a lot of Euro DSBM is with like the really silly names for bands, but here you actually got some really quality bands, and we're going to talk about a couple of them pretty soon. And they also have some pretty innovative ways of playing. They'll really remind you of some like Dark Throne and some like really crushing DSBM that the West has. And the third style that we're going to kind of cover here is black thrash, which is something that Japan has some very influential bands of, Sabbath being the big one. Unfortunately, I don't think they're covering Sabbath's best album here, but I'm kind of beating around the bush a whole lot. Let's just kind of get into it. Up first is Psy with Infidel Art. Here's the thing about this album. Psy has not been great since their first record. They dived into that avant-garde style at the second album, which is Infidel Art. And I'm going to say straight up, this is a good album. It's not great, but it's good because it's not that good. And what I mean by that is like, it's cheesy enough where it can kind of carry it. It's like, you treat it more like power metal than you treat it like black metal, which I don't really prefer. I really want my grim and dark stuff. Like Psy, they dropped an album this year, actually, the year of our Lord 2022, and I didn't like it at all because it was really just an updated production style of this style of music, and that stuff I was just like, ugh, this is like so tired. It's so boring. It sounds terrible. And this Infidel Art album does a similar thing, but it's crunchier production and it's a bit more of a progressive structure. So I think that's an advantage. But check out Psy's debut full length rather than anything else they've made. And I hate to be that guy, but I don't like anything else they've made after that point. So it gets a good, I guess. And it doesn't get any better in quality because next we cover Abigail's Intercourse and Lust. Yeah, this is black thrash and it does nothing at all special. It's just very sexual in terms of lyrics. And these guys, they do a bunch of collaborations where they get all wild and crazy, but it really just sticks to the most caveman style thrash riffs. And in terms of thrash metal riffs, I want to hear some more melodic stuff. I want to hear some more crazy stuff, not just caveman stuff. If anyone's going to do caveman thrash, it's like some Slayer that can do it well. And Abigail doesn't really do it that well. So I'm actually going to give this one a pour. I don't prefer it. It actually gets pretty boring. But I will say the last track on the album had some awesome riffs. It's a really inconsistent album. And next we cover another blackened thrash band, Sabbat, with The Dwelling. This is a unique album because it's one song for almost an hour long, and which is pretty cool. You don't think blackened thrash would be able to maintain something like that. Tra does that, but they have a really avant-garde style. Black metal can do that with ambient sections and all this sort of different stuff. But Sabbat, they kind of stitch a whole bunch of ideas together in this big, long, progressive, almost like a mess. And it's a three-piece band, so you get kind of a hollow sound here, but it also feels a little bit contemplative and a bit melancholic, which is weird because blackened thrash, you really think they would emphasize the energy, emphasize the punchiness, which is kind of my issue with blackened thrash, because it takes the least good elements of black metal and a lot of the parts that don't mix with it with thrash. Like thrash has all the energy and the punch and the fire. Black metal, if you're going to do that, just mix with death metal, because then you get the real crunchy aggression. And there is a couple cases actually, that I think it works. I believe Immortal does it pretty well. Inquisition, they have a bit of that hyper melodic style as well, and they do it pretty well. But Sabbat, they managed to do it all right also, because they just feel so locked in and so charismatic. It feels so genuine, which is one of the advantages. One thing I like about these vocals is that they are yelled. They're yelled so loud that they sort of turn into harsh vocals without being like just going straight for the growls or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, actually. This is an outlier and not the average, but it feels passionate, which is cool. It is not necessarily perfect, I'll be honest, but it feels like there's so much power behind it. It's got this really punky nature. There's also some cool little piano stuff, which is kind of fun. But I'm going to give this thing a great, it's kind of a landmark album. I think Sabbath has some better albums on their early catalog, but you can't really diss The Dwelling. And up next is Tyrant with Legend. This is an outlier on this list. It's the only album like this. Because it's just straight up symphonic black metal, and it's not good symphonic black metal. If you like Emperor, you probably won't like this because it sucks. It's incredibly boring. After about 2 songs, I wanted to stop, but I stuck through it and kind of just gave it a cursory listen for the rest of it. I heard very few riffs that were of any note. The symphonics were beyond annoying. The vocals were nothing to talk about, really. Just don't waste your time with Tyrant. It's bad. It's poor. And then I got Magain with Beginning at the End. This one was really tough to find, and it's really not as good as it should be if it's this hard to find. But there's a reason it's not that hard to find. It's because no one should care about it that much. The guitar tone is kind of sludgy, which is cool. It's a very aggressive album, and that is something that this Japanese scene is kind of giving a lot of. Very few of these feel disingenuous or plain, It feels normally like they really mean what they're talking about. There are a lot of Japanese sort of folk sections, which starts off all right, but then it quickly becomes grating. The tempo also never really gives me anything to work with. It's always just kind of fast, but it's never too extreme. It doesn't really slow down enough. That is one thing I do appreciate my black metal, is variance in tempo and pacing. And that's actually something I'm trying to work out with my own band, Noah. Let's slow down. But, no shade to any of those guys. I love them, of course. For real, no shade, that is a joke. I'm sure they would understand that. But we'll always be better than Magane because it's never that good, The riffs get too repetitive also. So I give this thing an okay. Don't really waste your time, though. Next, we get Cadenza, Into the Oriental Phantasma. I don't know what that means, but, here's the album. It's like symphonic thrash. It doesn't even feel like black metal. There are a lot of proggy parts of this album, which, means it's bad. But the synths are totally goofy as well. I do think Endless Labyrinth is a dope song. It's very creepy, very cool, but the rest of this album really does leave something to be desired. I'm going to give this a low okay. I don't know. Don't really waste your time. Maybe check out the song if you're not a prideful man who checks out only albums like me. Finally, we're on to something cool with Endless Dismal Moan's self-titled record. I was talking about DSBM a bit before, and here we go with one of the harshest, most aggressive, avant-garde pieces of music here, because this riffing style is so unique. Literally every song sounds different, and this is up there with one of the harshest sort of recording styles that I've ever heard in black metal. You know, stuff that Leviathan reaches at points, stuff that Swordsend is consistent with, and it's a pleasure the entire time. The reviews for this album are not great, and I do not understand why. This thing is a burner. It will make you feel so alone. Very dissonant as well. These chords are drunk. And it's got a whole lot of caveman style riffs going on here, but at the same time, they're very intense. You know, I really feel them every time they're on. And it's a mix between these shorter 3-minute assaults of blackened DSBM with a little bit of grind thrown in just because it's so freaking fast, and these longer atmospheric pieces that it just drowns you and suffocates you. The track Talking Mind is straight up scary. A lot of these songs are super creepy. You really get into this sort of like folklore, really ghost territory. It's really some awful sounding stuff, and for that, of course, it's great. And next is the band Misogi with Tofo Tukami Wemitamafe. I'm spelling it right now. My bad, bros. I do have a friend who speaks Japanese, so maybe I should just ask him to pronounce this stuff for me. This is some nice lo-fi black metal with a really oppressive sound, and it's got some top-notch riffs, which I've been looking for. And it feels a little bit like Immortal in a couple ways. And there are folk influences here, but they are far less annoying than they could have been. And it's got some really awesome atmosphere. It's really solid stuff. You know, in the context of this chart, this is great. And up next is Quest for Blood, self-titled. This is another avant-garde band, except they don't really feel all that blackened. But instead of doing all these different instruments, it's just flute. And I've talked about albums that just throw in flute before. There was a shoegaze album that I covered not that long ago that kind of sucked. But here, it's actually super cool, and not for a blackened reason. This album does not feel at all like black metal. The riffing style is a little bit black metal, and I'm sure the band members here all have influence like that, but don't think of it like that. This is not an album that you want for black metal purposes, even if it is slightly on the blackened side. It's way more progressive stuff, and the flute is just jazz flute the whole time. And it is a lot, and it's kind of hype. It's like you got this really hype pop flautist, and she's just shredding. I think it's a girl in this case, and she's just shredding the whole time. And it's just a masterclass in how to play the flute. And you know what? I can't knock it for that. It's just a fun album, and it's got some atmosphere to it. It feels kind of aggressive at points. It feels a bit dissonant and shrill, which is kind of cool in the context of this album. You know, I think this thing is great. Honestly. Super fun. Next we get SSORC with Infidel Eternal, and I'm going to say straight up, there is a Dark Throne cover at the end of this thing, and you don't need to hear it. But the rest of this album is pretty cool. This is classic black metal stuff. If you want something more akin to the Norwegian sound, here you go. You got dissonant horn changes, some really sharp pounding toms, a vague sort of melodic tinge to it with some awesome riffs. The bass is occasionally great also, but it normally just does what it needs to do, which in terms of black metal is never something to complain about, but you know, the additional effort is appreciated. Track 6, since this is in Japanese, so I don't really know how to say it, has some really awesome dark riffs, so totally recommend that one. It's very harsh and ugly, even though it's not that raw or lo-fi. It really is just all due to the tone of this thing. It's a really rolling sort of mess of an album here, you know? You kind of get hints of Profanatica, maybe a little bit of Profanatica. I think this one's great too. I'm starting to wonder why I didn't like this chart. I mean, a lot of these are really solid. This next one is a band called Gnome. Gnome. And if you look up Gnome on Spotify, you're going to get a different band that's like a stoner prog band that I actually reviewed on my 2022 doc this year, and you guys will probably see that if you check that out when the year-end list comes out. But this is Under the Black Moon. This is a demo, and you can find it on YouTube. It's just 26 minutes long. It's raw, and it's kind of cool. It reminds me a little bit like Ragnarok, but a bit more on the lo-fi side, which is pretty cool. It's got some really catchy Atmo-style riffs, which is to be appreciated. The second half of this record is actually all ambient, which is really solid sort of Burzum style ambient, and I mean classic Burzum style ambient. So, you know, good stuff. I mean, this thing's just 26 minutes long, so in terms of that, it's great. It's an awesome demo. Just kind of wish you did more. Next, we get Manierisme with The Past in Sorrow. This is one that I thought was going to be great, and then it kind of just dragged on forever and ever. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Torture Chain. I think it's what that band was called. They were an album I covered last year on Nothing But Black Metal November, where it had sort of a Dark Throne sound, and it was really impressive to start off, but just the riffs couldn't carry it, the atmosphere couldn't carry it, and by the end of it, it felt just a little bit flat. And this case is same here. But, it's got an avant-garde twist on this really unearthly DSBM. It feels just insane, silencer type stuff. Or even endless dismal moan, like we already covered. The riffs are melodic and weird. The production style is a bit like Tra being this raw. The riffing does remind me a little bit of Zaster's like acoustic stuff. Not his folk stuff, but his acoustic playing on his black metal records, where it's just drunk and wobbly and super weird. And for that, there is a plus here. But again, it doesn't uphold its entire length here. I feel like it does kind of run out of ideas. So I'll give it a good right now. If this is a thing you love, I wouldn't blame you. It just, for me, runs out of steam. Next, we get Absolutized with Den Svarta Van Dan's Genealogy. Apparently, this is an EP, but it's only a half hour long. I don't know what that means. So this has got some really insane vocals and a riffing style that reminds me a bit like prime era Lamp of Murmur. Not the last Lamp of Murmur record, the first full-length album. I will give a caveat, though I have not heard the demos, so maybe I'm just a fool. But yeah, it's a half hour in an EP, so I don't get that. But a half hour is still not that long. It is mostly solid. The production is in a kind of sweet spot, and it is intensely grim. If there's anything that carries this EP here, it's that it just feels so oppressive and dark. It feels like doom is right around the corner, which is cool. What can I say? And the only flaw about this thing is that it feels a little short, but at the same time, it is just an EP, so I can't really knock it for that. I do give it a great. It's not that long. You can knock out this and the Gnome record in less than an hour. And then we get Hakuja with Legacy. It's this decent lo-fi DSBM sound, and it's all the trademarks of a standard but great release. In terms of genericness, DSBM is one of those subgenres that you can be as generic as you want, because you can probably be good. There was an album I listened to earlier this year that every single song had the exact same structure, even acoustic parts at like the same mark. And you guys might be able to find it on my list when I eventually post it. But what was hilarious was I still gave it a 6 because I was just like, it sounds good. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's all the same, but I'm not bored, because you kind of got to review things. I review things in terms of the listening experience. And if you shut your brain off just one notch or two, you might not even notice. But if every song does sound a bit the same, I can't give it a too high score. Unless you're Pure Holocaust by Immortal, because that thing's based. I will say, though, the bass work on this album adds a whole lot. And I'm not the first person to even say that. A lot of people online were commenting on the bass work. My handwriting is terrible, but the song with Baal, B-A-A-L, in the title, is one of my favorites. It's got some really excellent riffs, and it's probably one of the best parts here. It is, of course, a pretty standard DSBM release, so I do give it a good. But, if you want to check out something else after you're done with the greats here, check this one out. And we're finishing off today with Cataplexy, with Lunar Eclipse, Chaos to the Ruin. What a name. This and Endless Dismal Moan are probably my two favorites on the chart. Just gonna say straight up. Just awesome stuff here. It's fast, it's lo-fi, it's melodic. Black metal as it should be. But it's also loud, super loud. Really nice riffs. A bit reminding me actually of Forest, the Russian NSBM band. But, it's excellent stuff. It's also very atmospheric. It really upholds this grim feeling. The drumming is a real highlight as well. It's pretty active and it never misses a beat. No pun intended. But it's got a blistering tempo this whole time. Burn the False Idols is one of my favorite tracks here, as it's just a burner. Just a fast-paced, just raging track. And it's also got a killer drum solo, which you don't see drum solos in black metal that much. And it's got some brilliant songwriting throughout. This is an album that's going to require re-listens from me just because it's so smart. But, you can kind of see and imagine what I'm going to give this, but this is great. So I don't know what I was too salty about with this chart. I'm going to be salty editing this because it's 25 minutes of footage, but I did just give you guys 15 albums to listen to, and they're not all good, so just listen to like 8 of them. But I will say, it had its moments, I hate the avant-garde style, it's pretty pathetic stuff, especially when it dips too much into black metal, because it doesn't mix at all. If you're going to be avant-garde black metal, be Ved Buenzend, or however you pronounce it, because those guys, they made it so weird and crushing and cool. But, I think it's all I'm going to cover for Japanese black metal as a scene for now, but that is the chart, you know. I can't really fault the chart because it covers the scene relatively well, even though there's higher ranked stuff from Japan in terms of black metal. But a lot of it comes from Sabat, so don't even know what to say. It's not like Norway, where like once you get past like 3 Burzum albums, you're gonna finally reach some like Lia or whatever. But you know, this is an alright chart. That's about it though. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoy these records. Please check out my next video when we introduce nothing but black metal in November, which I'm really hyped for. And I'm just hyped for November in general, you know. Check my band out on Instagram. It's gonna be in my Instagram page, which is gonna be linked in the description below, as well as you're gonna find my Discord there. You're gonna find all my social media, and I hope you guys can find it in your heart to like and subscribe, you know. But that's about it. Hope you guys are doing well out there. Have a good day. Bye.